Hey everyone, welcome to the Human Cloud Podcast, the spot where executives, entrepreneurs, and innovators drive the freelance economy forward. So today we have Asal Naraghi. Asal is the former global head of strategic priorities deliveries over at Phillips. Asal is going to sort of totally, what's the word when our brain just gets expanded to a level that we can't even take? Mind blown, maybe? I don't know. It's late in the day for me over here. But so Asal is going to let us in her world as an HR leader. Now, my question to her immediately was, how in the world do I talk to you and how do I motivate you? Because being in the freelance economy, HR generally is a gatekeeper, not necessarily a change maker. And so we're going to hit the head on that. That's actually one of the first questions I'm going to ask her. And what I think you're going to walk away learning is that, yes, we are threatening, but we can be a savior to them. And savior is probably the wrong word, meaning we can really drive what they want to accomplish. So, one of the things that really struck me after the conversation was that a lot of the terms and metrics and strategic priorities that they have, honestly, the freelance economy has already solved. The difference is that freelance is external, where they're generally focused on internal. And so, example I'm going to give of that is that their focus is attrition. And so what it sounds like, and this is consistent across every time we work with HR, but what it sounds like is, as an HR leader, if you can say that you decreased attrition by some material percentage point, you're sitting pretty and you're doing really well. But the freelance economy actually is going to increase attrition, and we can't lie about that. But if you think outside the box, what the freelance economy does is it actually keeps freelancers there generally longer than full-time employees. And so average tenure is between 2 and 5 years. If you're treating a freelancer right, they'll stay with you forever. And so the freelance economy is already solved for attrition and tenure, but existing HR, whatever you want to call it, policy or thought, doesn't necessarily have that calculated in. Another thing is that she had mentioned the word talent pools. And I kind of chuckled because within the freelance space, we're hearing a lot about freelance management systems. We're hearing a lot about internal talent pools. And what she had mentioned was that talent pools are the groups of roles or people that you want to make sure get promoted. And she used a word called succession. And I chuckled and I said, well, that sounds like a talent pool. How come you don't just lean into your freelance partners to help you build a talent pool? And then the last thing is sort of asking her, why is the freelance economy not already 10 to 30% of every company's freelance workforce? Her response was that there's this black box. It's the dusty corner, and that is performance management. And so when you look at freelance, this is also where I chuckled, I said, listen, freelancers, there is no better way to measure merit than a freelance model. Be it reviews, be it the actual percentage of completion to outcomes. There's no better metric, but it takes internal transformation to get that. So, in a summary, the number one thing that I did take away is that we seem threatening at first, but we have to do a lot of work in making sure they understand that we're not threatening. And if we can get it right, we can materially move the needle for them and this was her words, HR transformation, specifically enabling them to have an agile workforce. So here's the challenge to every one of you out there. Instead of the freelance economy threatening HR, how can we enable it to drive HR transformation, specifically enabling an agile workforce? If we can figure that out, we're going to get a bunch of HR people promoted very, very quickly. They're going to absolutely love us, and it's going to push the freelance economy forward. So enjoy. I know this is probably one of the longest intros. I apologize, but it's a really, really fascinating episode. And most importantly, get out there and go drive some change. So thank you so much for hopping on. So, okay. So there's many directions this is going to go. For you listeners out there, Saul, we've known each other for 6 years, circa 2017, probably, right?
Yeah.
Was it through Leanne? Yeah. So here's the thing. So HR has been one of those topics / stakeholders that I don't know really anything about, but I was pretty good at avoiding. And so what I'm so pumped about is you letting us in the inside of how HR can be a change maker and not a change blocker. And so that's where you're going to come in. I'm so pumped to learn more. And I think my hypothesis is that everyone listening is going to walk away going, wow, this is how we can either A, be in HR and drive change, or B, work with HR to drive change. So I think I think that's the theme, but let's just kick it over to you. And if it gets boring, then we'll just go straight with like Persian stuff, and you'll show off. By the way, I called her dad. I called it the eagle thing. That did not go over well. By the way,
No, not good. Not good.
yeah, I know. But so let's hand it over to yourself. First off, give us a background on yourself. And by the way, you don't live in Newburyport, but I'll convince you one day to move there.
I mean, if you could find me a property there, great.
After maybe after this podcast, someone will be listening and go, you know what? I got a place for a new report. And I'll go, okay, perfect, sweet.
Looking to buy.
Yeah. But over to you. Let's learn about yourself.
Yeah. So I am Asal Naraghi. I originally grew up in suburban Washington, D.C., DMV as we call it. I'm Iranian by nationality background. I was born in Madrid, but lived in Northern Virginia for most of my life, and then moved to Boston, went to graduate school at Boston University, went to Virginia Tech for undergrad. I'm a Hokie. And started my career in staffing. So I'm a recruiter. I know a lot of people are triggered by recruiters. I'm a recruiter by trade, and have really kind of driven my career in talent, right? So agency background, dabbled a little bit in market research at Forrester, then went on to a healthcare consulting firm. And then I went on to Phillips, which is a global med tech company, and spent 8 years there. And I was the head of strategic priorities, recruitment and talent there. And yeah, so here I am. I live just outside of Boston, maybe 10, 15 minutes from there. I love fashion. I love contemporary art. I'm Iranian as they get, but I do love the Patriots. Is that a problem for people listening? I don't know. So that's a little bit about me.
So you've adopted the crazy Patriot blood. People are
I
quite
know.
obsessed with them, Beck. I'll be honest. Growing up there, you either love them or hate them, and I was very much like, I cannot wait to leave and not hear about them because 21 years of that, I was okay. I'll be honest. I was okay. But so how would you describe? There's a couple questions I have. The first one is, how would you describe the purpose of HR? Why in the world do we even need HR? I'm going to keep it wide open.
I feel like that's, I keep seeing these memes on Instagram and reels on Instagram about don't trust HR. And I feel like there's this I feel like we have like a PR problem, right? And my role was really like I sat on a talent development and organizational effectiveness team, which is a COE team, but my career in general has sat at the part of larger HR organizations. And I think when you talk about HR, we're there to enable employees, whether they're people leaders, individual contributors, staff. We're there to enable the people function, or the people rather, and let them be the best version of themselves at work, or at least enable that. And we're almost like conductors, right? We bring in the resources, whether it's learning and development, talent acquisition, rewards, whatever those tools are, and operate as sort of the conductor of those resources. I think that's the sort of operational component. And then you have the next layer, which I see a lot of organizations are doing, which is the strategic HR component. And that's where we connect a bit more, we intersect more as well. Workforce strategy, strategic workforce development, build, buy, borrow strategies, and how are we really isolating the right capabilities that we need for our organizations to build the workforce of the future. And I think that's the real fun stuff and the exciting stuff where we can start to build these sort of, I like to think of as like skunk works teams where we build HR strategy and talent strategy and take it to the next level to build the workforce of the future for our business leaders, right? Where we're sitting side by side, hip to hip with the leaders to build a business. Because talent is our number one asset as far as I'm concerned in a company.
let's try to hit the love language in order to get HR to move. And what I mean by that is, typical CEO, increase revenue, decrease cost. Typical product person, some sort of increasing engagement, some sort of traction type metric. Talking about operations, some sort of cost efficiency, some sort of streamlining. But when working with HR, it's kind of tough. And I do think you just separate it by the strategic and the operational side. But I'm going to totally generalize this all. So, please call me out on this. But most HR people that I've met, they usually studied something related to psychology. And then they hopped into HR thinking they were going to make the best place to work. And then they got kind of disempowered within 2 years and realized, oh no, this is kind of a legal function, or this is more of an operations function. And then sitting on the outside, I'm looking and I'm going, how do I motivate these people? How in the world what terms do I use to get them excited about a freelance program, about something new? And so what is really driving someone in HR?
Yeah, so I challenge your container notion. That's what I call what you just said is like you threw us all into a bucket. And
I know.
and that's,
Educate me.
I think that's the problem, I think, or problem to solve when we look at HR as just like one big bucket of people that we're all just the same. And in fact, it's a quite dynamic function, right? We have strategic HROs that sit and they bring value from one perspective. And by the way, many of them don't come from that background. Many actually move. There are places where people are moving from the business, believe it or not, that were great people leaders and have these capabilities, where they understand how to drive sort of this, like the people component really well in the business, and they are able to make a cross move, right? So there's that. There's the COE. So then you have like talent acquisition, leadership development, learning, right? And so there's these different functions, and many of those, they're not psych people all the time, right? And I always joke that, like, for me, I might have always thought that I was like a soft skill person, given my background. I did my graduate thesis on working with Daniel Goleman's work, which is working with emotional intelligence. And I never really thought of myself as like a hard skill operational person. And now throughout my career, I've become like an agile HR person. Like I embedded agile into my organization. Like I learned from software developers how to build Scrum teams, and I embedded it into an HR organization. I learned lean, like lean manufacturing, and I embedded it into my talent acquisition organization. And so, the capabilities are just so different. So I would first just say, if you're listening to this and you're not within the function, and be surprised, there are what I would say secret squirrels like myself that are out there that have really strong business capabilities that can change business in a really programmatic way, and can sit side by side with a CFO, COO, and R&D leaders to think really strategically about how do we sort of rebuild the business while keeping in mind this sort of people component. Actually, we can operationalize it. And I think the magic is finding a way to take the business strategy and then deconstruct it into a really great people strategy, and then take it down into an operational workforce forecast that's comprised of what you love to talk about, which is this, a different types of workforce mix to deliver the capabilities that the organization needs.
Gotcha. Okay. And so it's easy. It's how do I say this? It makes it easier when you can put people into a bucket. And what I mean by that is, right? And if I'm going to go talk to a product person, we're going to talk about CSAT. We're going to talk about engagement. We're going to look at traction metrics month over month. So when looking at HR, like you said, it is tough to bucket. Now, I think what would help for that, walk us through over the past 5 years, what are some of the biggest challenges that you've been solving for? Because I know when we met, it was how do you get a freelance workforce? How do you scale a freelance workforce throughout an enterprise? That's a beast, right? Now help us understand what are some other challenges that you've been, on the front lines of in the past 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the last 5 years, it's funny, when it was 2019, I had done I had probably met you maybe the year before, something like that. And then I went and did a presentation at a conference in like the fall of 2019, where it was on remote work and how remote work was
Remember those days?
remote work is going to be like the future. And I have to say, they put me on the last day of this conference, and I got half the room filled, and everybody looked at me like I was Doc from Back to the Future. And I was like, guys, the DeLorean, and everyone's like, yeah, all right, I gotta go. And like, look what happened in 6 months, right? And so I think, like, for us, for where we were at, like, I think began this sort of snowball effect. And like, what were the problems to solve? Well, I think the first was, how do we, and it seems to be like the number one thing since, is how do we start to work in an agile fashion? How do we work iteratively? Because strategic workforce plans, processes, policies, everything that we thought to be true went out the door. Like, you can no longer plan for 5 to 10 years ahead. And interestingly enough, if you look at Tesla and you look at Amazon, like, this was a concept that they had been talking about for so long. They had been saying this for a while. Like, everything must be iterative, plan for increments. And so what we focus on, or what I tried to focus on, is like, how do we take our operations, take our policies, processes, systems, and make them iterative. And you'll see this coming up in a lot of the consulting firms now, as they share how to drive agile HR transformations. Most large-scale companies, and this is maybe a container notion, but I have heard this from talking to a lot of companies, they are doing HR transformations. I'm sure if there's HR folks listening to this at large-scale companies, it'll resonate. And one of the number one key themes is driving an agile HR organization. And that means that we are trying to figure out, how do we shift and change course? Why is that happening? Well, it's the unpredictability of economy, social unrest, the employee lived experience. Everything is up for grabs right now. You turn on the news and you see unions. The unions are really taking a control. And I would just say, this is America first we're talking about, but the rest of we are sort of the change agents for workforce strategy for the rest of the world. They stand and they watch us. So it started with diversity and inclusion, 2020. Black Lives Matter. We were the tipping point. Then you started to see it the next year in Europe. And they're still trying to figure it out in Europe. It's really humorous, right? So I think it's how do we shift gears fast, not knowing what's next? And then, of course, you have AI. AI is just one more example of, like, how do we stay on top of all of these things? And helping not only our process, system, and people navigate through that change, whether it's their emotional experience or the day-to-day operational execution of the work, right? And I think that's a good segue to employee experience, right? And when we talk about employee, like, what does that mean?
Right. So the high level, which I guess this is something, to be honest, that I've just always taken for granted because I started in tech. So for me, when I think agile, it's just everything's incremental, right? And even when you're building any type of feature, you realize real quick there's going to be scope creep, there's going to be things you didn't plan for. So if you're not having some sort of iterative feedback loop every 2 weeks, you're screwed, right? You're going to build the wrong thing. And I've actually seen in the past 5 years, man, I've seen $1 to $3 million investments go into technology where if they just spent $20,000 figuring out what they should build, they would have been better than after 2 years and spending $20 million. So it is one of those things I definitely take for granted. Now, what you're hitting on is, and I've heard this, I've heard it many a times. At least once a week you see this word, which is HR transformation. But being on the outside, you look and you go, okay, well, what are they talking about, right? Are they talking about a technology transformation? Are they talking about a systems transformation? Are they talking about a people transformation? What exactly are they talking about? And so the shift to agile being a key component to HR transformation, that makes sense to me, right? I get that. Now, why is it not as simple as, hey, there's this, and I would argue freelance economy is a technology, but there's this technology / there's this new model for workforce strategy. How come it's not as simple as, let's just put 20% of our workforce into freelancers and go partner with one marketplace? Why is it not that simple?
The shift to agile really hits upon a nebulous, dark, scary corner of HR that nobody likes to talk about, which is performance management, leadership development. Does not be little bits that means have to start being, leaders have to get out of their ivory tower. They got to go to Simba. They got to get to know people and manage the leaders, right? And I think that means frequent feedback, encouraging regular real-time feedback instead of annual reviews, forward-looking conversations, focusing on future development rather than past performance. And so that means HR has to have that, like, come to Jesus conversation with themselves of like, gosh, we've avoided this. What we've been doing is sort of promoting people because of cronyism or not asking leaders to be accountable for being leaders. We've allowed them to sort of not hold their teams accountable, right? And I saw this infographic today that was like it said something about percentage of companies that actually mandate training to both employees and leaders on the topic of performance management. And it was like only 10% of companies are doing this. So this is why, because one begets the other. They're not, if you don't, you have to go further up the funnel to understand, okay, if as a leader, I know where my capability gaps are, then I understand what my workforce problems are. Then we can advise on the right workforce mix and where to build, buy, borrow, right? So I think that's where the naughty little parts are hiding, the dusty corners that nobody wants to open up the closet and go and have a conversation. And I wouldn't say that nobody wants to, but that's where we're at. We're at the precipice of it. Why? Because of attrition rate. Why? Because of the unrest of employees. And so if we're opening up bigger conversations, and at the end, the value stream is the workforce strategy component related to freelancer strategy.
So I got an interesting question related to that. So why? So what you're hitting on is there's kind of a black box / dirty, all dusty over there in the corner, kind of the elephant in the room. So there's an elephant in the room, which is performance management. Now, why do companies, and this is totally looking as an outsider, why is it a big deal if 50% of the workforce leaves? And let me give you the most tech sort of not socially aware type perspective, because I have engineering brain. Twitter's working fine, right? Or X, whatever you want to call it. It's fine. It's probably better than ever on most metrics. They got rid of 80% of their people. Why do we care if over half of people are leaving your company?
Capabilities are a capital asset.
Tell me more.
Your skill is a capital asset. Skills are an asset. They're our greatest asset to a company. I'll say it again. Your skills are a capital asset. And that's why you're starting to see the trend of upskilling talent. We're trying to build our capital asset, which is knowledge, right? And so what we're learning is that the skills capital is scarce. There's only so much. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to build it. We got to retrain, reskill, right? Because there's only so many, developers, whatever. And also we have AI now, right? So can only use AI so much, or we don't know it yet. We don't know it, but AI is like getting stronger than the human brain in some capacities. We don't trust it. We're not sure. So it's an asset, and it works to our benefit as a company. It's stronger than anything, right? It's an invaluable, reproducible asset that costs us nothing. They can use my brain 1 billion times, and they don't have to pay for it, except in my salary.
So let's keep going on this line though. So one of the biggest blockers for HR getting on board is that they have to open up the elephant in the room, which is performance management. My question then goes, who cares if people are leaving? To which your point is that there's skills capital, right? Just like how we have, if you look at a balance sheet, just like how there's inventory and actual capital, there's skills capital. Now, here's my question though: what if an employee is only productive 31% of the time, or what if an employee only 40% of them are going to upskill in the last 6 months, whereas a different workforce is 100% productive and has a 60% upskilling rate in the last 6 months? Back to my point, why do we necessarily care about the skills if it's only relevant 31% of the time?
Yeah, and I love this question. And what you're hitting upon is another major trend that's happening, which is the talent to value contract, where you identify critical roles, and not all roles are created equal. They don't have equal impact, right? So you're right. So if there's certain roles that a company defines as the most critical, and this is what, I've been working on for the last 2 years, those roles are the ones that we want to wrap our arms around, invest, make sure we do not lose them, right? And understand that which roles drive the most value to the company. That's the ones we do not want to let go. And you're right, those other ones, we don't obviously want to lose you, but at the same time, they don't deliver the same amount of impact that this layer does. That is a massive trend right now. And you're going to hear this from some large-scale consulting firms. And what we want to do is allocate the best talent to those roles. And so that means whether I have that capability or not, still meet and get me there. Get me there, because Asal she's got sort of the DNA for it based on leadership capability, aptitude, learning agility. Like, again, I am not a developer. I learned Agile. I was a product owner. I had a Scrum Master who reported into me. I didn't have a technical background. Upskill taught me, right? And so that's the step where you have dynamic resource allocation. You're reallocating talent as the business needs change. Agile. So that's why you care. And you're right. You're not going to keep everybody, but you want to keep your best, and you want to dynamically resource your internal talent effectively. And by the way, then you bring in what you're talking about, this workforce strategy, this layer of, mobile, I keep thinking like this cyclical, contingent workforce that can move, and why it's important to consider it in this conversation.
Gotcha. And what was that term you used? Was it the value term?
Talent to value.
Talent to value. Okay. Talent to value. And that means is that like an ROI calculation, or what's the?
It's basically a company should identify the critical roles within their company, and you do it based on capabilities, right? So you do it based on capabilities and then also roles, and you define not all roles have equal impact, right? So the impact that these roles or these capabilities deliver to our company are much more valuable in the organization than these roles. And I don't want to get into what I think or whatever, because for every company it's different. But historically, you might say that maybe, maybe a data entry position delivers different impact than global, maybe software developers. I don't know. The market is flooded with developers, so I don't know. I'm just picking this, okay? It could just be anything like that, but the company has to define what those are, and they're variable based on what the business strategy is. Like AI, AI is a great one. Right now, AI, people would say anything that and any of the developers in AI deliver, their impact of Flash is 10 times stronger. Why? Because it exponentially delivers more revenue for our company than perhaps the hardware engineers, right?
Now, so is it only skill or role based? And I know, was it Deloitte that came out with like skill based hiring over role based? So how do we keep in mind though the top performers at an individual level? Because my thought as a CEO is, if someone's good, I am not going to let them go. And out of 10 people, there's probably only 2 good people. There's 5 neutral people, and there's 2 or 3 toxic ones. And so when I look at sort of, 10 people, I want to know who those 2 people are as soon as possible, and I want to put everything behind them. Is that Does HR consider that, or is that me being a purely ruthless business/product person?
No, I think what you're suggesting is succession planning, performance management. And this is where I think I'm always surprised when I hear that companies don't have robust performance management strategies. But I guess they don't. You're having, again, we talked about more iterative conversations, more regular, rather than once a year annual review. So it's forward-looking conversations. They're happening more frequently. You're keeping those top performers engaged. And you talk about future development rather than past performance. What do you want to do? And then also pooling. So at a talent management level, you start to create these talent pools, and these we call talent dialogues, right? You have talent dialogues around, okay, who are our top R&D leaders or R&D high potential leaders that we need to just have an awareness of, right? And what I'll also just add is we start to bring in the intersection of diversity into this conversation, okay? So not only are we looking at the skill and the skill or the capability, but then if you're with it, and what you need to be considering in this day and age is diverse leadership or inclusive and diverse talent management, right? So there's bias reduction. So implementing these measures to reduce biases in recruiting, promotion, and evaluation process, right? So bringing that into the conversation to saying like, okay, how do we promote more women of color into sales leadership, right? And you're having these talent pooling where we have a slate. And then what I would also just add is using data as your anchor. Using data as your anchor to say, listen, this succession plan is not a strong succession plan unless we have 3 diverse talents in the succession plan. Right?
And what, this is going to sound so dumb, what is a succession plan? Is that planning for people that aren't good?
No, succession plan would be, if I'm the leader of an organization, you have a list.
Planning for those that aren't good. Okay, so the promotional plan.
Yeah, who's in line?
And you mentioned talent pools. Is talent pools already a term used across HR?
I would think so. I mean, I would say that you build like talent pools. And again, I'm talking about internal talent, right? I'm talking about internal talent. But by the way, if you start to think about funneling, talent pooling helps you start to push people up and then frees up space and movement at the lower levels then creates visibility and openness for other workforce mix, right? So if we move this person up and over, then that means this person slides in, and then maybe at interim for 6 months, because we know budgets are tight, we bring in a contractor for 6 months, right? Or we know that based on the location of where we need this to be, we got to hire a freelancer for this work. Or we use the gig strategy, internal gigs, by the way, which is another workforce strategy, using Workday. I'm a Workday person. Sorry for anybody on the call or listening. Their SAP web. I'm a Workday gal, big fan. It can do anything. But if you can slot someone over. very quickly, by the way. Another talent and value concept is how quickly you can slot someone into the job and how quickly they can deliver value to your organization.
So we talked about performance management, and now bringing up the talent pools. These are all things that freelance marketplaces do. And so why there seems like there's a disconnect. Why is that? Is it because HR is only incented to care about internal? Why isn't it right? Okay. So that's the big elephant.
They're not incentives. So I want to be really clear. Nobody's getting bonuses based on using internals. What's happening right now is that attrition rates are through the roof. And the number one reason that people are saying, I'm out of here, is because of career mobility. This company is not providing me enough career growth. And the answer from HR is, okay, we got to create more mobility strategies for the folks that were here so we can keep them here. And I think it's great. I think it's the right thing to do, right? At the same time, what I think is where there's a gap, and I used to put out the podcast by saying like, there's this sort of adversarial relationship between, contingent workforce, or procurement folks and HR, because they think they don't work together, but really it's a missed opportunity, right? Like, why are we not seeing it's just one more thing to pick off the shelf, right? Like, okay, so let's use internal workforce strategies first. How do we retain talent by helping to give them an opportunity internally or upskilling them? And at the same time, look, if the capabilities, we can't access the capabilities because the best internal talent sits in Shanghai and the hours don't work, then what's next in line? Do we go hire a full-time person? Probably not, because it feels too committal and we don't know what the job is going to look like in 18 months. Then let's go and look at a contingent worker. And I think where there's a gap, and this is another big point with HR transformation right now, is capabilities of HR professionals. This is what needs to change right now is the actual capability of the HR folks. And I would say all. I think I work with a lot of fantastic, highly strategic HR professionals. And also what I observed is that you have folks that are just very comfortable in their silo and have not really stretched themselves to take a much more 360 approach at talent strategy, HR strategy, any of these things to say like, okay, what are all the avenues we can take to really deliver an impactful people strategy for our business stakeholders so that they can build their business and hit their goal, right? Their business strategy goal.
So here's and this is why I just love doing the podcast, because this would never come out in 15 minutes, right? And it would never come out in a format that's like, hey, we've gotten to what I think is one of the core. Freelance is so damn threatening to the power of HR is what I'm hearing, because you're mentioning attrition. Freelance is going to increase attrition. And, I'm not going to lie, we would kind of lie to HR by saying, no, it won't. Like, your employees won't be threatened by this. But the reality is 52% of freelancers will never go back to a full-time job. 77% of freelancers feel healthier, and 66% of freelancers make more freelancing. So the reality is, if you do get a taste of freelancing, you're not going to go, or over half of you are not going to go back. The other reality, which is now something that's been true in the past year, is that it's no longer I'm freelancing until I find something bigger. You can make more being a 10 plus year expert freelancer in a fractional capacity than you can if you're a director or VP and above at a large company. So all angles of all the full value stack of a career, freelancing can now be better depending on who you are, right? If you're a top performer, it's better. If you're not, it's worse. But what I hear some of the things that you've been saying is attrition, right? We're gonna make your life worse if you're an HR professional, because we are gonna make your attrition higher. The difference is you have to think outside the box, because you can actually keep the freelancer, but they're not going to be measured under the way that HR currently measures. Because the reality is freelancers don't leave if you treat them right. They actually work with you forever if you treat them right. But that's not measured under an HR process of what you're saying. The second thing, what you mentioned of talent mobility, this one actually kind of cracks me up too, because if you look at a freelancer talent mobility, it's quicker. They can span larger across the organization or broader across the organization because they're not committed to just one team. And so commonly what we see is if you take a freelancer who starts working in, say, the Office team or say the PowerPoint team, they're going to pretty quickly go from the PowerPoint team to the Teams team to the Word team to the Azure team to the Xbox team because they can. There's no internal mobility process for them to go. Literally, they can be found easily on a marketplace, and the hiring manager says, "Oh, you worked with Xbox? Of course, we want you here." So, what part of what's kind of hitting me, which we've seen it before, this is not surprising. It sounds like freelance is really threatening to HR. And if I was an HR person, I would say, hell no, keep that away from my team because I kind of have a job risk. How wrong am I?
I would say I would move away from the storyline that it's like that HR wants to control a certain thing. HR works for the people. They work for the leader, the business leader. So, and also what you're hitting upon is something that I kind of always feel in the back of my head sometimes too, is that like it's a control point, right? So to your point, it's like when you're an independent contractor or when you're a freelancer, you have this agency over your own environment. You don't have somebody to tell you, like, look, your performance review is going to be X, Y, Z. If you do, you can just be like, yeah, I'm good. I'm going to go this. So there is this component that you evade as a freelancer. And I would just say that, yeah, probably, but I would not say that like HR is like, oh, you're an affront to like this thing. How HR can really play a role in this moment is taking again a business mind. Like, I mean, for me, I always see talent as just across the same. Like, how do you bring value? How are you adding value to make the business successful? Right? You're not, just because you're a freelancer does not mean you don't bring value to this company. You bring a load of value, and we should be able to leverage that person in whatever capacity that they are in. It doesn't matter to me,
So here's the thing, Asal. So the freelancer is going to do better than the full-time employee because they are measured in a much shorter feedback loop. So the freelancer is going to be measured in that week, that month, or that deliverable. And so I'm not worried about them. They're going to over deliver. I'm worried about the VP that prior was going to their HR lead to source someone in 3 to 6 months that finds out that when they can go to a freelance partner, they're going to find someone in 2 to 5 days at 30 to 60% cost savings. And that person is going to do better than, I would argue, over half of the full-timers that they're working with. That to me seems like very threatening to HR, because then that leader with their budget is going to say, let me allocate it away from full-time and towards freelance, which then creates the dynamic of procurement in HR. And literally the way I see this over and over and over is talent acquisition gets involved, but talent acquisition, and they're good at first, but then they get really scared because they do see the results of 2 to 5 days to find someone, and then usually 2 to 4 weeks to onboard and hire, but it's still better than full-time. And then they do try to stamp it out, and they do put a bunch of legal and procurement related controls. For example, how are we going to get a laptop to this person?
Yeah.
Little things like this that you're just like,
You sort of make it like so like complicated. And at the same time, I always like to look at everything from a 360 perspective. One of the challenges that I always observed was with when you bring the contingent worker, and it was just always such a longer onboarding to like get them to understand the culture and ways of working. But by the time they got to it, fine. It was fine, right? As opposed to slotting when we did gigs, internal gigs. I think you called it garage at the other place, right?
it was another Garage Door innovation team. Yeah, of course.
Okay, so you remember.
You do remember. Yeah, of course.
So that was really awesome. And I'll tell you why it was awesome, because it was like you just thought of someone who was already working, who could do up to 5 hours a week of work and just help out, right? Now, that's not the same as using a temp. Temp is totally different, but gigs was like short-term help for a little bit, a little bit of work, not full blown. That's different. And I would just say the onboarding of a contingent worker just to get to work and go forward. Yeah, I think you're right. The other piece of the pie, however, is that my experience, and that doesn't mean it's all experiences, contingent workers cost us more money. So the value was not there.
It costs more money, you're saying?
In my one experience, that does not mean it's
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
that they were more expensive than hiring a full-time person. This was just my experience. That does not mean it's not everybody. So the cost benefit was different for me in my experience, but that's maybe not true for you. And so I would be open to learning more. I think every company has it different. And I don't think the point, but what I do recognize, and I was thinking about this earlier, that the laws are also set up to not put freelancers in a position where they can be working side by side just like an employee, right? Like in America, you don't get to go to the company picnic and you don't get to use the learning resources. Why? Because you have to be treated differently so that there's no like mixing of the two. Otherwise you owe me benefits and you owe me all, the vacation and all that stuff. And so it's purposely built that way so that you go, I want to be a part.
Do you know why that is actually? Yeah. So, because when I started, it just didn't make sense to me, right? Like when I was freelancing myself, I was billing through PayPal and stuff like that. And it was, it was small dollar size. But do you know why legislation, what is the one reason that legislation cares about this?
I have no idea. Tell us.
Tax. They want their tax money. That's it. That's really all that's driving this. And it comes, like everything in America, it comes down to two parties. And so one party gets paid for by unions, one party gets paid for by non-unions, right? Yeah. The union party is ensuring that taxes will come from a very, very small proportion of companies. So they love the fact that if they don't get most of their tax money, they go after one company rather than 60 million individuals. If everyone was freelancers overnight, I think the U.S. government would lose like $2 billion, like $2 billion plus, just in tax collection. And so a lot of the legislation is literally as cut and dry of how is the government going to get their tax money? And one side tries to make it as hard as possible to be independent, and the other side tries to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah.
So what happens though is you have, and this is where we're never going to get rid of freelancers now. 10 years ago, maybe, but now you're never going to get rid of them. What you're going to do is you're going to create an ecosystem of consultants, EOR providers, and classification providers, because the margins are just so damn good. And so you have freelance marketplaces with 100% margins just because they're handling the classification, and it's still better than a full-time person for a year when you can have someone for 3 months or 6 months or 9 months. So it's...
And what's also, I would just add, what's fascinating to me is to your point about the HR wanting to sort of compete with the freelancer economy. The freelancer economy really is helpful to inclusive and diverse talent, right? It caters to different backgrounds, different lifestyles, different like neurodiverse talent, right? Especially people who are like anxious and they can't work every single day. Or it caters to such a huge community of diverse and inclusive lifestyles. And I think what's happening right now in workforce strategy and employee experience strategy is like companies are at their wits' end. Like, how do we deal with this? They're saying, all of these new things are happening. It's like, no, none of this is actually new. All of these employees have been in the workforce for so long. What they're doing is they're unmasking. They're unmasking and saying, I'm here. I've been in the workforce with you. And now I'm okay to tell you that I have all these things. And it's your job as a leader, your job as a company to help me continue to be a productive employee in this company. And if you're not, then you're not a great company to work for. You actually stink, and I don't care what your EVP is. I don't care how much stuff you put out on LinkedIn. I'm here to tell you it doesn't work. And I'm happy to be a freelancer, right? And so what you're starting to see is that these companies are starting to test concept of what? 4-day work weeks, right? Groundbreaking. So this is their dipping their toe in the water of what freelancer work is as a way to what? Keep the diverse talent. Why? Because the diverse talent and talent pools are saying, like, look, we're usurping the system now. And the freelancer kind of has been bumping against this for years now. We will take control back, right? And again, they find a way. And listen, I'm not here to say one's right or one's wrong. It's only, I like to sit back and observe. I'm a corporate gal. I like working I love working in big companies. And I think if you're an HR person, you got to, as we say in Boston, smarten up and figure it out, or get left behind. And I said also this about the remote work: smarten up or get left behind. Right? Stop forcing people to come to the office 5 days a week. And now here we are.
Yeah, we could do our own session on the diversity of the freelance economy. Now, here's the thing: in 5 years, I don't know what it's going to look like. If you look at the last 5 years, it was a very diverse population, and there was, when we were doing the book, the majority story that we heard from freelancers doing well, it was interesting. It was 45-year-old plus women who were directors / VPs, but then their kids became sick or they wanted to commit full time to their kids, yet they still either needed or wanted to have a lifestyle that they could still make money. And so, that's going to change, right? Out of all my male friends, to be honest, all of us are making less than our partners. And so, because you're Iranian, she is way smarter than me. So I don't know. I'll just say, I don't know what it'll look like in 5 years, but my software brain goes, the mechanics of the freelance economy are the highest correlated to outcomes and feedback. And I think that would be the core of merit, the closest we can get. And so I don't know, because I don't know the science of if you use ultimate merit, what happens to diversity. I literally don't know. But my assumption is if you took away names and faces and you just worried about the outcomes and the relationships, you'd start to see what we want, right? So I'll get off my soap.
I mean, and that's exactly it. And I think it's effective performance management, focusing on impact delivered, and asking leaders to really show up and hold their teams accountable, while also, by the way, recognizing like what their own leadership gaps are in the moment, and that could be just effective communication, driving clarity, and understanding what the capability gaps are in their own team. Like, this is it. This is where we're at right now.
Yep. No, I love it. So the 5 takeaways that I have, which is really cool. So really, really cool was, so the whole reason that HR has to move, there's no longer I can just sit on my desk and do the same thing the person before me did, is that you can't have 5 to 10 year plans. And so that creates HR transformation. HR transformation is predominantly, or a key driver is being able to be agile. Being agile, but also then implementing freelance. It hits on the dark corners, which is performance management. Performance management within that is talent pools, which that one cracks me up because in the freelance economy, that's a word that's getting thrown around and it's already been around. And it's common sense, right? It's building up a pool of people that people like to work with. But the last thing is that the talent mobility aspect. So listen, this was incredible. We're going to do a little rocket round. I will give you, if you want a minute to just hit on, hey, this is what every HR leader should be thinking. And then we're going to do a little fun rocket round.
Okay.
You have 2 minutes. I'll give you 2 minutes, actually. 2 minutes.
Every HR person should be thinking. That's the question.
Honestly, you can make your own prompt if you want. You can talk about whatever you want. We can talk about the fall. When was it, 1974 or 1971? We can talk about that if you want. Whatever you want.
Oh, no.
No. We can talk about it here. We're fine. But
well, I think so. What every HR, I would say, and talent strategist could be thinking is, how do I enable my leaders to drive agile teams, right? Iterative and work iteratively, right? And then the other piece is employee experience, and then using data to understand that. Those for me are like, it. Are we really understanding what the needs of our people are and using data to drive those objective versus anecdotal? And by the way, we use, listening strategies do both, but let's use data and the listening strategies to get a holistic picture, and then problem solving. These are all capabilities that HR needs right now.
I love it. Cool. Okay, ready for rocket round?
All right.
You have 17 seconds for each, okay? First question is mics are modern.
What is it?
Mics are modern.
I can understand it.
Boston. Mike's pastries are modern.
Oh, mics are modern. Everybody knows. You go to modern off the top.
Really?
Modern. Oh, modern.
I'm not gonna lie. Most people I talk to, it goes Mike's. Mike's gives you more, a little like fatter,
Mike's is like the Food Network choice. Nope.
You're not wrong. At least it's not Boba's. Okay, you got a Friday night or Saturday night in Boston. Are you going to Chinatown? Are you going to the Seaport? Or are you going to the Little Italy?
Neither. Back Bay, all the way.
Really? Okay. Favorite Persian restaurant?
Moby Dick. It's in Washington, D.C. My uncle owns all of them.
Oh, no. Okay, now... Oh, really? That is so cool. Now, favorite Persian restaurant in Boston?
None.
Don't say that, because Farney's going to hear this, and I'm trying to get back to
and honestly, this is a debate that I have with so many of my Iranian friends here, is that we cannot find one. There's one place called Roxana. It's in Watertown. But it's weird because it's like open at random times. If you get it, you get it. But Roxana, Watertown, check it out.
Can you just lie and say that Boston is filled with Persians, especially Newburyport?
Watertown is filled with Persians. There's lots of, to be honest with you, I was the chair of the Middle Eastern Employee Resource Group. There are plenty of Iranians.
They're all professors. That's the problem. It's all the professors.
No,
man, exactly. That's what I keep telling her. I'm like, she's like, is there Persians there? I'm like, well, of course there is. There's the best schools in the world there. So they got the smartest people.
Persians, for sure.
Oh, man. Okay, it's a Friday or Saturday night. Where are we going to find you?
Okay, so you'll probably find me at my friend's restaurant, Facha in the Back Bay, and then having drinks at the Quinn afterwards.
Nice. Okay, favorite show or movie right now?
Okay, this is crazy, but my whole team in India put me onto this show. It's called Made in Heaven. It's on Amazon. It's like amazing. If anybody's listening and you watch Made in Heaven, please send me a note on LinkedIn. That show, the second season just came on. I had to put on subtitles because some of it is not in English. That show is so awesome. If you look at that show, hit me up.
That's incredible. All right, two more. Favorite book?
Okay.
You can do a set of books if you want to.
Yeah, so, there's this really, really amazing book, and I'm really into, just self-help, all the stuff. So there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it talks about trauma and just, all this. It's an amazing, amazing book if you're really kind of going through your own sort of self-reflection, but also I would say HR folks, if you really want to understand people's lived experiences, anything by Brene Brown, anything, this book, The Body Keeps the Score, is just so incredible. Love it. And anything Chandran, she's like a Buddhist monk. I love Pema Chandran. So yeah.
Last question. Favorite animal and why?
Panda. Pandas. Pandas. All they want to do is hang out, eat bamboo, chill. Don't mess with them though. They're actually real, and they're so cute. And they're all going back to China. In America, Yeah, they're the ones in the Washington Zoo. Been here for a while. I've had the pleasure of seeing them. I grew up in Northern Virginia. Pandas are the coolest animals ever, and actually, one of my dreams is to go to Chengdu in China and go see the ones. And you can actually pay to hang out with the baby pandas. It's so amazing.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, I was just going to ask if you knew China owned all the pandas, but looks like you do. So where can our listeners find you?
LinkedIn. You can always find me on LinkedIn, Asal Naraghi. Just find me on there. ASAL. There's only one.
I love it. Asal, thank you so much for hopping on.
My pleasure.